And before I say yes to that, is everyone okay with the recording? Yeah. Okay.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, well, welcome everyone. Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedules to join us on a discussion about doing a literature review with regard to liquid democracy and how that'll impact the plans for the delegated reps. I'm putting this together in my role as a member of Steve's governance oversight committee. And the objective is kind of twofold. I want to introduce to you the Zotero tool that I'm using to kind of gather some literature. I want to see if you're interested in maybe volunteering and reviewing one or two articles and providing kind of a brief summary. And then we'll talk about if we do get the Fund 8 funding, then this will be a first step towards putting a community white paper together. And I'll want to talk about kind of the scopes and planning of that. So welcome, and why don't we do some brief introductions. So again, I'm Kenric. I lead a company called Photrek. I've been involved in Cardano since 2017 in a variety of capacities. And it's really exciting to be working with Steve now on, kind of overseeing how we're doing in the governance programs. So Jack, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I'm Jack. I work for IOG, and I am part of the governance sort of product team, working on more of the front end execution for delegation that's coming up at Altair. So really exciting times to be part of the team for sure. But yeah, happy to be
Great,
involved.
thanks, Jack. Appreciate you joining us. And Thorsten?
Yeah, Thorsten Pottebaum. Hello, everyone. I've been involved in Cardano since September last year, working very closely with Stephen at the moment on the auditability topics. Part of the auditability circle. Is that the circle? Is that officially circle? I don't know.
Yeah, audit circle. Yeah,
audit circle. Yeah, and in that context, obviously, governance is an element which more or less feeds into that one. And I'm really very much interested in the governance side of Cardano and specific catalyst.
Great, thanks, Thorsten.
hi, I'm Stephen Whitstall. I'm of QADAO, which is a project that started about a year ago now, mainly focused on documentation of governance, oversight of governance, auditability of governance, and it's been tracking different governance projects in catalysts like Catalyst Circle, and most recently community governance oversight, which is what we're at the umbrella of what we're discussing here, and Audit Circle that Thorsten just mentioned.
Great. And Steph?
Yeah, hey guys, Steph, I work for Wolfram Blockchain Labs. It's a subsidiary of Wolfram Research. We began participation in Project Catalyst in Fund 7 and again in Fund 8. We really believe in kind of the use case of governance analytics and governance intelligence in just the blockchain space in general. And so one of my roles is to get closer to the communities that we're working in. Cardano is integrated into Wolfram language. So we're just doing our best to tap into what is an awesome community and understand governance at a high level and a low level, and just be ecosystem supporters and developers. So I met with Kenric a couple weeks ago just to chat and catch up, and we'll catch up to what's been going on in this group in these meetings, but happy to be here.
I really appreciate you joining us. It's great to have your input. So that's great. So let me sort of kick off with sort of an introduction to my perspective on this area. Part of my goal with this is to ask the tough questions about governance design for a decentralized community. I hear a lot of happy talk within both Catalyst and the broader cryptocurrency communities with regard to what people's aspirations are for trying to develop new ways to create economic systems and governance systems around the globe. But I think the task is actually quite daunting. And in particular, I think that there's a couple of things that are very basic dynamics that make it hard. You know, on the one hand, we want to have sort of bottom-up democratic principles with regard to, and diversity with regard to people's participation. At the same time, we are naturally competitive, and everyone in a community sort of naturally competes to enhance their wealth, power, and authority in a community, and that can lead to situations in which power and control become centralized. And actually, I think part of what makes it doubly difficult is there's still a lot of open questions as to what kinds of organizations are actually most effective. So, you know, there may be situations in which a more centralized organization has the ability to outcompete. And so how do we not only uphold the principles of a decentralized governance, but how do we make that effective so that we're actually making good decisions and able to compete in a global landscape that isn't necessarily going to be forgiving. And thank you, George, for joining us. We've all introduced ourselves. George, do you want to go ahead and take a minute and introduce yourself?
Sure, Ken. My name is George. I work with Emerson. I'm an electrical and electronics engineer, so I did my bachelor's and master's. Been in Emerson for 20 years now. Product development, mostly new product development in electronics. It's software focused on compressed electronic safety systems. So last 1 year, I had been learning about crypto, and with Gitcoin as my starting point. And the last 3 months in the Catalyst system, trying to learn more on through YouTube videos on ETH as well as other projects, primarily with C4C Cardano for Climate Group, and that's with Kenric had been talking about the quadratic voting and some of the governance protocols, and that's my link in this governance discussion. And from voting standpoint, 1:1 for ADA to vote. I find it discomforting, as if it is $1 million ADA person, then he gets million ADA vote, and a 500 ADA person gets 500 ADA vote, 500 voting power, which is kind of empowering the bigger ADA holders. So that's the other thought process on that, to come into this governance discussion, and how to enable it in the right way. We want to enable people who believe in ADA, meaning people who hold a larger stake, means they believe in the ADA system. At the same time, the ratio between 500 ADA person and a million ADA is a huge marker. And even we see wallet sizes of 50 million based on previous Kenric's work. And so that ratio is too high. And is that an abuse of the system when we look at that level of ratio? So what is the realistic level of process to be in place? That's
great. Thank you, George. I appreciate that introduction, and welcome to the effort. So I'm going to go through a brief introduction to the Zotero tool. You all might be familiar with this, but I'm also kind of viewing it as a way to use this exercise to kind of educate the community about how to do more in-depth research on these topics. And I'm also taking approach, this initial meeting is was by invitation. But as we get our plans together as to how we're going to work as a team, I plan to broaden the invitations to the community. But that will need to include some requirements about, what the goals are in terms of doing academic style literature-based research and what's required to be a participant in that. But that's part of what we can begin to discuss. So I will share my screen here, and I'm going to bring up a tool. This is an application, and I'll go to a website later, but I'll start with the application. This is an open source bibliography tool called Zotero. And in my life as a person passionate about reading and studying and writing and being involved in basic research, I've used a whole variety of bibliographic tools. And this is my newest one. I've actually just committed to it for this project. I've been kind of exploring options because the most recent one that I've used a lot called Mendeley, which is quite good. Its latest versions I'm kind of unhappy with and have decided to kind of look around. And so this is also for me a test as to whether this Zotero tool is a little more effective and hopefully a little bit more sustainable as an open source software package. And I've begun to populate. So in this first window here, you basically see an organization of folders. And then in this main window, a whole collection of articles that I've already populated that with. And I'll go through the process of doing that as well in a moment. I have my own library on my, for my own things, but I'm focused today on this group library on DAO governance. I decided to do this as one folder, or one group rather, that you were all invited to, and there's a few other people that have been invited as well. And then it's broken down into 4 subfolders right now of topics. And then, for instance, you can set up other groups. So for instance, I have a group that I run that's called Machine Intelligence for Complex Systems, which is a whole nother activity on machine learning. But I also what I want to do as part of this portion of the meeting, I'll go a little bit further with this introduction, but I want to also kind of drill down on the areas I've been interested in, and then also learn what areas you all would be interested in exploring. So drilling down a little bit further here, one in this area of liquid democracy, I believe it is, as I have this one, there's an article called Power in Liquid Democracy. And this particular article really gets to the heart of a difficult issue that I think is actually quite critical. And I want to also maybe introduce kind of what I think is the proper scope for this first white paper for this group. Since we're only going to, since I want to sort of complete a white paper as a team over a 3 to 4 month period, that, in my experience, that's not enough time to do actual high quality research. The projects that I sort of publish myself, it's often a multi-year effort to actually publish a high quality paper. However, what I think we can do as a white paper is lay out some of the difficult questions and challenges that the community needs to be focused on, and that maybe we need to hold accountable the designers of DREPs to be putting together plans for how you're going to address these challenging questions. So for instance, in this paper written by Yusei Young Zhang and David Grossi from the Universities of Groningen and University of Amsterdam, they're looking at this critical question of how do you measure power in a voting system? And maybe I'll wait because I want to keep it, I won't go into the details, but the point here is that in a liquid democracy, you have a lot of dynamics going on, right? You have individual voters making a choice as to whether to vote on individual projects or to vote on or delegate their vote to another individual who would then vote for them. And even if you just keep it at that one layer, I've already heard in the community, and it's a very natural question, what's the most effective use of my vote? Do I have more influence by voting directly on proposals, or do I have more influence on finding a representative for my vote? And a bigger question that I would like to have a better understanding about, but again, it may be that we're only able to frame the question and motivate it as a problem that people should maybe even write a catalyst proposal to try to fund, is if I choose to vote directly on proposals, at what point, as George was describing, given the spectrum of wealth in the community, given the spectrum of wealth that's going to be represented by the DREPs, at what point do I really not have a voice? You know, because I can put in a vote, but if it doesn't influence any outcomes, then I don't actually have a real voice in the decision-making. And I'll just emphasize that those that have been working with me are sort of aware. Part of what this paper highlights, and others like it, is the fact that you shouldn't think of voting power as being proportional to the weight. In this case, the weight would be the number of ADA that you hold. Rather, you should think that you should understand that approximately your voting power grows quadratically with the weight. And more generally, it grows quadratically with the number of votes that you have the ability to correlate together and have vote the same way. And that quadratic behavior is part of what makes voting systems very challenging to be fair against a whole variety of different metrics of like how you even define what's fair. So let me pause there with the introduction. I'm going to show one other thing in terms of introducing this in a moment, but maybe just question, either questions about the, and I'll go back to the main thing. Be great to have some questions about the Zoter tool, the way I first laid out the library, and, and start the conversation of where your own interests might lie.
Just a question on opening that paper. I'm in the group and I'm in, I can see the power and liquid democracy kind of, it has an icon of like a podium next to it, which I don't know if that means I'm not able to open. I would love to read that though.
All right. So this one, the article is available. Let me do a update. That should be, because I've updated this a number of times, but I've just done a sync here on the right. So that should have gone.
I'm actually, it looks like I'm not logged in. Maybe that means that I need to be logged in order to see it.
Well, on mine, as I just opened up, the way this seems to work is that the first line gives you the bibliographic information here on the right. So that's all the information about where it was published. And then there's a second line that is the notes that I took so far, and this was just a sort of an example. And then finally, you have the paper itself, and it seems to me if you double click the paper, that's when it opens up. Do you have that third line in your, and maybe others can confirm this or not?
I don't have more than one option. I just have,
Okay, so
maybe it's
that's a
just
good,
mine. See if somebody else can confirm or deny.
Yeah, I'm just having a look actually, see if it's the same for me.
so that's quite interesting. And while we're doing that, I think what I'll do is I'm going to stop sharing because I can take this, I can use this question to show some other things about the tool. So let me stop sharing here, and I'm going to open up a new browser window and get the Zotero tool itself open in the browser. And I'm curious.
Yeah, I can't open it directly from the browser.
Okay, so now, yeah, so that's what I'm gonna try to, let me share my screen again. I've got a browser open. And, okay, so that was the application. And this is a browser window of Zotero, and I'm logged in as user Kenric Nelson. And then I've got open the groups that I've set up, and it has the two groups. So I can click this link for the group library. And I'm curious what it looks like on here. So if I go down to that same liquid democracy folder and I do power in liquid democracy. Okay, so I agree with you. So it looks like the group folder only shows the bibliography. It does not show the actual paper.
Yep, that's what I'm
Now,
seeing.
okay, so has anyone installed the application? Anyone
I
on
have
the
not.
team?
No.
So maybe as one task, if a couple of you could try during the week or even later today to actually install the application. What I'm curious about is whether whether it will download just the reference or you get the whole paper. And I'm also curious if there's any settings. My task will be to look at the settings for the group as to whether there's a setting about what, because it's quite clear that the group folder on the web only has the references. It's not including the papers, and that is a nuisance. I agree.
Emma, can you go through the tabs on the right-hand side at the top where it says info, notes, tags, attachments? What's under there? Info?
Yeah, so, okay, so on this one, the info is the bibliography, then the notes, and it does seem to have my notes that I put in there. And then tags, I'm not familiar with what tags are, but that's something we can look
I
up.
think it's a way of categorizing your... yeah.
Wait, okay, so here, oh, there's, okay, so under attachments, see if that does it.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
just
so the
giving the
original,
URL.
it does give you the link, so that's helpful. It gives you, it says there's one, the full text.
Kenric to interrupt
Yeah.
I go back to my sort of group, what groups I'm invited to. It says that I'm access, which could be, to your point about permissions, it could be a case of just needing a bit more permission to access.
We can look at that too, what the group, what each person's accessibility is. I'll take a look at that as well. Now, what I'm curious about is it seems the attachment, it says there's one attachment, so the file is recorded there. I suspect that if you open up the application, you're going to get both of things. For some reason, you don't actually, it doesn't seem like, I would have thought just double clicking that would open up another window, but maybe you need to have the application installed and then it'll download this attachment because the information for the attachment seems to be there.
When you added an item on the application, Kenric, did it automatically download the PDF of the paper?
Yes, so I'm going to show you that next. Now,
Okay.
it shows the original URL for the paper, so I can still get the paper this way from the web. So if just to show that again, down here is the link to the original paper. So that's how you can get the paper. Now and let me go through this. So I'll open up another window here and I want to show the basic tool I use for searches. So Google actually has all kinds of different search engines. You know, most people just use the main search engine, but you can have search engines specific to books and a whole variety of patents, for instance. And what I use a lot is Google Scholar. So if you open scholar.google.com, then for instance, I can type in the title for that paper, Power in Liquid Democracy, and it will bring up that paper first, but then it will also bring up a whole collection of papers related to it. And it has nice features here too, like a very nice feature is it will show all the articles. This was published in 2021, so that's very recent, but there's already 9 papers that have cited that. So if I press this cited by 9, then it's going to give me the 9 papers published in the last year that cite that one. So you can really do a lot of good exploration with this tool of scientific literature. And then the other thing you can do is it also has like a database of related papers to this one. So I can bring that up, and it still keeps that in the lead, but now it shows a whole variety from any year of papers. These would be maybe even like the papers that it cited and other things related to this topic. So for instance, I know I haven't downloaded this paper. I don't recognize this one. So let me click on this next one here, Smart Voting, which again was last year and already has quite a few citations. 14 is a high citation rate for a paper that's just 1 year old. Now there's a variety. So here you don't always get access to the paper, and I don't know. Let's see. There's 2 ways to access these things typically. So this is where it's published. And that will definitely give you the abstract and the bibliography information. On the right, sometimes if the PDF is available, it might even be on a different website, but it looks like it's on the same one. But you can also just open the PDF directly. And if the paper like this one has the bibliography, this one seems to have the bibliography information in it. So I'll use this one right here. Now, what you can do is you add a button. So there's an add-on to your browser to import the papers. So this particular button is to save to this Zotero. So I'm going to press that. And the one thing I'm a little bit confused about how Zotero does this is it seems to download right away to wherever you last downloaded. Now, sometimes that's convenient, but for instance, on a topic smart voting, I might want to put it in a different folder than liquid democracy. I think, let me look at the other options here. Smart voting is kind of a more general topic. I'll just put it in the main one, I guess. And then I'm going to press done. So I'm not totally clear on the mechanism there, like whether it just saved once or it saved it actually twice to my database right now. There's some things like that that I'm still trying to work out. The other thing it didn't seem to do, let's see, sometimes. Okay, it doesn't really give you the option to kind of check the reference either. So the next thing I'll need to do, now the way this tool works, it actually saves it to the desktop application first. I'm not going to change the sharing, but I'm just going to do a update so it goes up to the web. And then come back here and look for it. It should appear here at some point. Let's see.
Kenric, do you see the main use of this is to have a common source for everyone here? So if each of us comes across a paper that we see relevant to DAO governance, then we add it to this, that becomes our common source. And then,
yes,
and then as to annotations or notes, are we able to collectively add notes to papers?
Yes, that's really the power of having a group is the notes actually. So for, it's definitely nice to share the papers together. That's one nice feature, but I think the notes are kind of more powerful. So, and that's maybe a good segue. And let me just see, I just want to make sure that look up smart. See, yeah, okay, so that paper did come up. Oops. Oh, okay. So that went right to the website. I don't really want to do that. I don't think I need that right now. Okay, and it looks like the bibliography information is pretty accurate. Sometimes it can be a mess, frankly. You sometimes have to edit it, but that looks pretty accurate. And then let's see if the attachment is there. It looks like the attachment is there too. Yeah.
Kenric, I was just playing around. I think I added that smart voting hyperlink under attachments.
Oh, okay. Fine.
So if you click on that, and then that'll launch it straight to the paper. But it also does that automatically from the other attachments. Like I couldn't.
So it might be a duplicate.
I couldn't upload the actual PDF file from my local computer because it says I need to upgrade storage. So it's just kind of that. If you scroll down a little to original URL, if you hit that launcher button, a little lower, a little higher.
This one?
No, if you stay on the HAL PDF full text and then go down to original, that
works too, right?
And I also added a note. So if you click on notes,
I excellent, thank you. Excellent.
Steph testing. That's the testing note.
All right, thank you, Steph. That's great. Yeah. So that way, that's where we can start to do more of a collaboration on this. So that's super. That's exactly the point. Thanks for that, helping with the demonstration, Steph. So now what we can do is I'd like to so my thought is I'm going to kind of keep going on this particular paper about power in liquid democracy. I'm interested in kind of hearing from each of you sort of what topics you might be interested in, and if it'd be great to kind of given your interest, it would be great to kind of go through the papers I've already downloaded and then maybe expand upon that and find some other papers to add to it. You're welcome to add a few more folders. I don't want to make that too long a list, but I haven't covered all the potential topics here. So maybe if a few of you want to chime in a little bit more about what your particular interests are in these questions about liquid democracy, that would be great.
I mean, can I just add from, because this is I was under the umbrella of community governance oversight, so there's a kind of community aspect to this as well.
Yes.
Where I would say, as well as people's interests, that's great. People have research interests. Can we also consider what the community's interest will be in terms of prioritization of papers? So, for example, this is just a suggestion, should we prioritize papers that focus on measuring DREPs or measuring the degree of, say, representational voting power in DREPs or something like that? So why? Because that would provide a way for the community to check the DREP initiative, for example. But it doesn't have to be that. That's just a community motive rather than an individual research motive.
I'm in complete agreement about the central importance of that question in the way you phrased it. So if the rest of the team kind of agrees that that's the right focus in supporting the community, I'm happy to be more focused. I thought, I was sort of thinking it's good to kind of like be a little bit broad at the beginning and then sort of narrow down to what the team is going to work on towards the white paper. But, you know, either the phrase measure or metrics of liquid democracy would be an excellent focus. What are other people's thoughts?
I have to second that, actually, because this is the topic on hand which the community kind of is chewing on at the moment. What does this proposal actually mean? And I mean, there are two sides of it. The one is to understand what actually gets implemented, and I think Jack can help on that side, because that's kind of the way we are implementing things. But then on the other side is the understanding the topic from what could be implemented and which pros and cons that is probably the biggest question the community has at the moment, to step up also in the sense of having an input into liquid democracy, the way it is getting implemented within QADAO.
Yeah, okay, excellent. Thanks, Thorsten. Any other thoughts on focusing on this particular topic?
Yeah, from my side, obviously, I'm working very closely on how we sort of roll out delegation and liquid democracy. So I do sort of echo everything that's just been said around making connections between Catalyst and liquid democracy, certain concepts of liquid democracy, because not all will be relevant, and sort of taking a lot of that high-level theory into practical applications of how liquid democracy will work within Catalyst, within a Cardano sort of framework, within a blockchain sort of world. And I know that you've covered some of that as well with the papers you've got here, Kenric. So this is a great start, actually. I'll have a really good read through of some of these links.
Okay.
So yeah, so from my side, just echoing everyone really, and be excited to sort of share more around how what we will be doing for delegation and liquid democracy versus some of the stuff that won't be relevant, right?
Yes, and I'll also say, Jack, that I did correspond with Philip Lazo this week, and he's interested in working with us on this. And I realized just as we were starting the meeting that I think I added him to the Zotero database, but I didn't have him on the invite for this meeting. So I'll send him a copy of the video, and he's already expressed an interest in working with us as well.
That's great. I mean, Philip is our principal researcher.
Yeah, exactly.
So, fantastic resource. Yeah.
Right.
Can I offer a suggestion on relevance? The tagging system. So if we have another meeting, let's say in 2 weeks' time or whenever, we could, in between now and then, we could go away and we could tag what we think is relevant to implementation of DREPs in terms of papers. So maybe that will act as a kind of, rather than go through every single paper and do notes, maybe we should just say, okay, we think that's relevant, and then we can go back and review that.
Yeah, so you know what, let me just try adding a tag here. I'll just, for now, I'm not sure what kind of categories to use, but for instance, I'll put my name here as someone who's read it. And then we can have some other tags. Yeah, so let's think, that's another thing to kind of think through, is what would be a good use of the tags, because that's a second way to kind of organize our path through these.
Okay, so if I could, I want to weigh in here. And the part of this that I'm really interested in is very closely related to this practical implementation of the DREPs, but more about how to objectively score the capabilities of these DREPs and create some kind of metric-based system by which we can analyze their performance over an extended period of time, as well as implementation of privacy preserving aspects. So I think
yes, and actually let's back up a moment, Amar, because we had done introductions at the beginning of the meeting. So could you just take a moment and introduce yourself?
sure. First, let me apologize for that. I was running a bit late with some other work.
Yeah,
Right. So my name's Amar. I go by Crypto King on Twitter. I'm currently doing a PhD in electrical electronic engineering. Previous to this, I was studying bachelor's and master's in mathematics. I really got interested in the idea of governance so far as self-governing systems. Once I started listening to what Charles was saying, and once I sort of figured this could, Catalyst could be a sort of a test bed for Voltaire, and Voltaire itself could lead to great things in the future in terms of entire nations possibly being run on decentralized governments, where even if they're not brought on chain, the implementation of these ideas could provide additional transparency, checks and references to pre-existing systems in Web 2 type of framework that we just don't have, and could act as a layer of trust in institutions pre-existing the chain, or perhaps develop a new type of institution going forward. So my entire reason for getting involved with you guys, I hope you don't mind, is to kind of figure out what these systems look like and how they could be practically developed, but also how to minimize corruption and negative actions within it, which is why I want to go towards a game theoretical approach of optimizing equations to try and figure out how these actors could behave within the systems. I hope that's all right.
It's great. It's really wonderful to have you on the team, Amar. I appreciate you taking the time. So that's super. And so let me do two things. I'm only going to take a couple more minutes with this meeting. I have another meeting that starts right at 2, and I'll need a little bit of a buffer. So let me actually start to wrap up the meeting, and I'll come back to your comment, Amar, and maybe we'll kind of respond as a community offline with that. So the next steps, I think for now, what I plan to do is sort of host a meeting every other week as we progress with this. So my first question is this a good time for people? How did this work out today?
Yeah, good for me, personally.
Okay, great. So for right now, what I'll do is I'll extend this as a every other week meeting for the next say month or two as we get underway. And
I should add as
And-
well, Kenric, just to, sorry to interrupt, I should add that most of you know, that we will be hosting workshops regarding DREPs and delegations, likely within, or nearly 100% within the timeframes of your suggestion of every 2 weeks we meet. So I suppose to that point, there will be Stephen's idea of having sort of a bridging exercise where we sort of try to link articles that have relevancy to DREPs and delegation that I can take away and work on as well into addressing those in some of the workshops, but with your guys' sort of support and deliberation
Okay.
would be useful.
yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
That's great. And yeah,
Would
and
it
we
be-
can make adjustments as the Catalyst schedule evolves too on the DREPs.
Would it be useful
Um,
creating a Telegram group for all of us here or something, or are you going to do it by email, Kenric?
On Discord? Sorry, can we do that on Discord?
Or we could do it on Discord. I don't know what people's preferences are. Whatever people's preferences are.
Henrik, search for Discord. I don't want to put word in your mouth, but I think that.
No, I prefer Discord myself. I think I don't right now want to set up a new channel for this.
Yeah.
But let me talk with Steve about what channels are available and where the best place for us to communicate would be. And Steve and I will work that out. That's a good suggestion. And so as a first task, and let me say too, this is all volunteer, but I'm really excited about having your participation. And as a first task, what I was going to ask is that you either pick one of the papers that's in the database already, or you do your own search and add some papers, and then let the community know which paper you're going to add some annotated notes on. And then so in our next meeting, what we'll do is we'll plan to go through and have each person that's done a review of a paper kind of present their review using the annotated notes. And then we'll also in that meeting start to plan out how we would approach writing a community white paper. And again,
the end goal, Kenric, like we are looking at, this is what you want to look.
Well, I like as a working title, maybe even as a working title is measuring voting power in Catalyst DREPs. We'll have to think about whether we want the white paper to kind of be specific to Catalyst design, or we want it to be broader than that. But that could be kind of a working title for the white paper. And as I said, because I want to kind of stay to a 3-month timeline, I'm going to be kind of strict about the scope being we're not going to answer the questions in that time frame. We're going to try to bring some organization to what the questions are that need to be addressed.
So we're doing more of a literature review survey type paper of the problems concerning the constructions of these systems in practical applications and not actually addressing any particular issue.
Yeah, because again, you may have missed it at the beginning, Amar. So part of my point is that what I really hope to get out of this is to help the community be more aware of the current research on these topics, and ultimately to open this up as a resource to the community that they can dig into themselves. And to acknowledge that to do original research on this and have it be impactful is typically a 1 to 2 year effort, to do high quality research and publish a paper. Now, so for this first phase of this, I don't want to set up an unrealistic expectation of what we'll accomplish. Does that sound good? Any questions for me before we close out, or suggestions?
Just as for information, I'll just post some links into chat. I mean, community governance oversight are also doing, as well as this, just general oversight of any activity that Catalyst or IOG are doing on DRAP. So every time IOG publish something or whatever, we document it on our Git book, and we're going to enhance that collaboration with IOG going forward as well.
A quick question on the data itself from the concept. Right now, we see the larger ADA accounts are playing a big role. And when we put a DRAP layer in between, does it not hide those behind? Does it become not visible? Does it lose that visibility of
So what
is
I'm going to
power?
suggest, in the context of sort of keeping things in scope, that's exactly the kind of question we want to ask. But we're not going to answer. Everybody, we all have a perspective on that question. But as I try to close out the meeting, there's no chance of coming to a resolution on that really central question in just a minute or two. So what I would suggest, George, is if you could even kind of frame that question into a good search topic within Google Scholar, and then identify sort of 4 or 5 really high quality papers that you think add information to that question, and do a review of one of them. That would be a fantastic input for our next meeting. That's exactly the kind of question that needs to be asked.
Can I pick up on this and ask, how limited is the scope exactly? Like, I understand we want to limit the scope and do a survey as opposed to original research, but what kind of breadth are we attempting to cover here?
I guess another thing I'm hoping is that this will motivate individuals like yourself to dig into deeper research and actually make original contributions. So I'm not prohibiting anyone to be ambitious and make original contributions on this important area. But, the part of my perspective, so I'll just give you an example. I lead this team called Machine Intelligence for Complex Systems. And it kind of grew out of the COVID experience where a young engineer reached out to me. He was interested in my research, and he actually put a team together, and I mentored the team. Now, in a 3-month period, I'm trying to think back, it was more like a 6-month period. We did write an abstract, but it didn't get accepted into a conference that we submitted it to. And then we kind of reorganized, we put a more ambitious plan together. And that research now has been ongoing for 2 years. And we have a lot of accomplishments, but we still don't have our first paper done. Because once you dig in and you really try to make an original contribution beyond what others have actually accomplished, you always run into hard problems that are difficult to solve. So it takes time to do. And what I mean by an original contribution is actually getting it published in a high quality journal or conference. I do have to close out the meeting. If there's, I can take maybe one important question.
Can I just say very briefly, speaking to what Amir says, I mean, and I think you referred to it at the beginning as well, Kenric, briefly, this is an opportunity for us to do community academic research in Catalyst together. So if we can also think of that aspect of this as well, like how can we as a community do academic research and liaise with IOG on that. So I mean, Amir, there could be an opportunity to do more in-depth something, an offshoot, as Kenric is saying, perhaps even funded in Catalyst.
Yep. And I'll also, I don't need to be, I want to be careful about the expectations, but I'm open to accomplishing more than I imagined. Yeah, so that's great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really look forward to working with you all. I think this is going to be a great effort.
Thanks all.
Here and see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Speak soon. Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.